Samuel. I'm going to read out of chapter 20, verses 16 through 17. And it says, So Jonathan made a solemn pact with David, saying, May the Lord destroy all your enemies. And Jonathan made David reaffirm his vow of friendship again, for Jonathan loved David as he loved himself. Um, Now, David and Jonathan were best friends. And Jonathan knew that God had chosen David to be the future king of Israel over him. And Jonathan was okay with that. Um, in fact, let's see, let's look at another verse. Let's go to chapter 23, verse 16. It says, it says, Don't be afraid, Jonathan assured him. My father will never find you. You're going to be the king of Israel, and I will be next to you as my father is well aware. So that the two of them renewed their solemn pact before the Lord. Then Jonathan returned home while David stayed at Horesh. So, um, Jonathan was the heir to Saul, King Saul, in fact. But when King Saul had disobeyed God, God took the kingdom away from him. Um, and by that, from his family. And Jonathan was to be the next king of Israel if Saul hadn't done that. Um, but Jonathan loved David so much because of the shared love that they had for God that uh, even while David was hiding, Jonathan knew where he was and would not give David up. I mean, this man loved David because God loved David. He respected God's decision that he wasn't going to be king of Israel. Um, in fact, he wanted to be beside David when it was David's turn to rule Israel. And sadly, that didn't happen because Jonathan was killed uh, in the same battle that Saul took his own life because Saul watched both sons die in that battle. But Jonathan couldn't care less about being king of Israel. He respected God's decision that he was not going to be king. Like David, Jonathan loved God so much. In fact, the two of them had something in common. Um, Jonathan, with his armor bearer, attacked a Philistine camp um, during a war, and his whole premise was that you know God could use him to wipe them out. He was that confident and respected God that much that he knew God would give him the power to wipe out the camp. And God did because of his faith and his love for him. Um, and David, of course, no, everybody knows about his his defeating of Goliath, where he boldly told Goliath that he was basically already dead, that God had already given him into his hands. Of course, that David did. And David was a teenage boy who was going up against this 10-foot giant of a man, seasoned warrior, in fact. Um, but it was because of their mutual love for God and respect for God that they brought them together, and they were so close. They were like brothers, closer than brothers. And because of the respect for God and for David, that's why Jonathan would never give his location up to Saul. In fact, Jonathan on numerous occasions had given David a heads up that his father was coming to gun for him, and so David was able to escape. Um, but yeah, it's a very big and bold thing to respect God or Christ's decision on uh, when it comes to something that the normal world think you should get or you deserve, but you're not going to get it, and you're happy with it, and you're happy for the blessing that somebody else is giving that, and the natural man would think would be outrageous or wrong. Jonathan never thought or was angry about the fact that he was not going to be king of Israel. He was ecstatic. He wanted to be by David's side when David was to become king. Like I said, and unfortunately, that didn't happen. Um, but I would go as far as to say that even while Jonathan was in that battle, and probably when he received that death blow, I would venture to say that Jonathan was probably rejoicing and happy for David because he would have known at that point that God was finally going to fulfill his promise to David that David would be king over Israel. That's how much that uh, Jonathan loved God and loved David. That's how much respect that he had for God's authority and for David's friendship and for David's blessing. Um, could you imagine how much better the world would be if we had more folks who are like Jonathan was to David? I think it would be more amazing, uh, and not so dog eat dog cutthroat that it is in this day and age. But anyways, that I love you guys. You have a blessed day, and we'll see you tomorrow.